Well, welcome everybody to Conversations in Graduate Education. I'm so glad that you could join us today. I'm Molly Lotz. I'm the Director for Research Training Initiatives in the Graduate School. And I'll start our program today by turning it over to our wonderful Dean, Celia Marshik, who could welcome everyone today.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to March and welcome to Conversations in Graduate Education. As many of you joining know, this is a once a semester workshop/seminar that we offer that really brings the kind of gold standard for graduate education to Stony Brook. So we have speakers who come to us to talk to us about some of the pressing issues in graduate education and to give us some ideas about things we might end up doing here on our campus as well. So in a minute, Molly will introduce our speaker for today, but I do just want to thank everybody for taking time to join us today. Also to note that we will have opportunities for you to ask questions. And just to remind everybody too, that we do record these sessions. So if you find it useful and you want to make sure that some of your colleagues are aware of it as well, please do pass that along to them because we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to benefit from today's session and the previous sessions as well. So I will now turn it over to Molly to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you so much. So it's my honor to introduce today Dr. Angela Byars-Winston. She is a Villis Distinguished Achievement Professor of Medicine at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She conducts diversity science research on cultural and organizational influences, shaping the career development and effective mentorship of college students and early career faculty in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. She was principal investigator in the NIH National Research Mentoring Network, leading the Culturally Aware Mentorship Initiative. She chaired the National Academy of Sciences 2019 Consensus Study Report, The Science of Effective Mentorship in STEM, and was an appointed member of the NIH National Advisory General Medical Sciences Council from 2021 to 2024. Dr. Byars-Winston's work has been recognized by the White House under President Obama's administration, and she is the 2022 recipient of the Outstanding Educator for Innovation in Mentorship Research Award from the Association of Clinical and Translational Science. She's the chair of the UW Institute for Diversity Science, where she hosts the Diversity Science podcast. I can say here at Stony Brook, we have benefited greatly from Dr. Byars-Winston's work in the research mentor training that we do and culturally aware mentoring, which we'll be launching on our campus this spring. And not only is she just a giant in the field of mentoring and STEM, but she's also one of the loveliest people to work with. So I'm so excited that you all will get to engage with her today. So Dr. Byars-Winston, I will turn it over to you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. I appreciate the warm welcome in this virtual space. Thank you to Dr. Molly Lotz for this invitation. Thank you to Dean Marshik to share some time with you all through this Conversations in Graduate Education. And as Molly just mentioned, and I'll go by first names, including feel free to refer to me by Angela as well, that this is a great opportunity, I think, for Stony Brook in general, but I think faculty altogether to really be thinking about how do we meet our trainees in this current moment. Lots and lots of things swirling, which we'll talk about. And my goal with you is to think about how we can approach empowered mentorship with some practical strategies. If you're like me, we have like one more webinar and what faculty can do to show up for their students. And so my goal is that you really leave with some actionable tools in your hand day one. 99% of what I'm going to offer for your consideration is no charge available to you. And we'll talk a little bit about that again. But I just want to honor Stony Brook for even creating space through these seminars to really think about how we actually activate our mentorship. So I'm going to share my screen and try this amazing technological feat, which I think I have set up well, but we'll find out. Give me just a second. Share, and I have to say it's screen number 2. That's the main thing I have to say, I think. And then I share my screen. We did this in dress rehearsal. Do you see the full screen?
Yes.
Yes, we see your
Okay, great.
slides. Yeah.
Excellent. Unfortunately, once you do see the full screen.
No, we see your slides. We see the presentation.
Okay, you see the slide or my notes?
We see the slide.
Excellent. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I apologize. Once I'm in this full screen, I cannot see you all anymore. So apologize. So I will look forward to leaning on you, Molly, if anything shows up in the chat because I won't be able to see it right away.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much. So I have two main goals for us today. Specifically, I want to share a little bit about some of the evidence for mentorship in STEM fields, in particular science, technology, engineering, math, and medicine. I want to acknowledge that I'm a counseling psychologist by training. I just play a doctor on TV, happen to be a faculty member in the Department of Medicine. But for my colleagues who are on the call who are from the behavioral sciences, from the arts and humanities, this is for you too. This is for us. I just want to acknowledge that my work that's been funded by NIH has really applied this work in the basic sciences, the biomedical sciences, and medicine. But again, I'll be referencing those contexts, and I invite those of us who are not in those fields by training to just extrapolate to our own professional disciplines. As I mentioned in my overview, I'd like to leave our conversation with some practical applications for how we can meet our trainees in this current mentoring moment. And then we'll have time for Q&A. So my vision is that we spend the first half of our time together with some remarks from me to really frame our conversation. And then the last part of our time together, last half, 30 to 45 minutes, we just have a conversation. Those who can stay, please do for questions and answers, but also some discussion, things that are populating up in your own mentorship. I do want to also acknowledge that, as has always been the case with Stony Brook in these conversations, this is recorded. I will also be prepared, I have also prepared handout for you that's just 2 pages that will have most of the references that I'll be speaking to in it. Dr. Lotz, Molly, has been kind enough to add it as a PDF to your calendar invite. I see she just added it to the chat as well. So my invitation to you today, especially over this lunch hour, is I'm going to invite you to be as present as possible. Allow yourself the freedom to not need to take screenshots or try to capture everything at the minutia, but really just to allow yourself to pay attention to what captures your interests. What are you noticing about the content, how it resonates with your own lived experience, and what are you more curious about? And so with that invitation, I hope that gives you a chance to just kind of woosah and exhale. And let's just enter into kind of a fireside chat moment. Just imagine ourselves around a campfire. I was a Girl Scout for 10 years, and we're just having a conversation to kind of raise the bar for how we can meet our trainees in this current moment. Sound like a good deal? Okay, some thumbs up. Thank you so much. All right, so I want to start off by the evidence a little bit to level set around why mentorship has been a focus of mine, why it certainly has been getting more national attention through federal agencies like the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, as a critical tool in advancing trainees' significant development. Um, in 2017, I had the honor of chairing a committee through the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, that we'll just say NASEM, that lasted for 2 years and culminated in a report that was published in 2019, which is the image you see in front of you on the slide, The Science of Effective Mentorship in STEM. And we worked together for 2 years to really collate research and scholarship on mentorship, and we provided this definition. That was the hardest part of this report, believe it or not, was how do we define mentorship? And again, specifically in STEM fields, we found that it was useful to use some literature from the behavioral sciences and this concept called a working alliance. And so we defined a professional mentorship as a professional working alliance, which is taken from the therapy literature on how a client and a therapist work together to help benefit the outcomes of the client. And so applying that alliance construct to mentorship, we defined it as a professional working alliance in which individuals work together over time to support both the personal and the professional growth, development, and success of both relational partners through the provision of career and psychosocial support. So I do want to acknowledge that in our work, we identified and lifted up the bi-directional nature of the benefit of being in a mentoring relationship. It's not just that the trainees get something out of it, but we know that mentors do as well. There are many colleagues like Aaron Dolan at University of Georgia who've been looking at the impact of mentorship on mentors. For my remarks today, I'll be focusing on one direction of the benefit, and that is mentors who are doing the mentoring for our trainees. The other part I want to highlight is that Kathy Cram's work in the 1980s really highlighted that the ways that we do our mentoring activities really fall in two different buckets. One is kind of those career promoting activities that are things like disciplinary skill acquisition, technical skills, sponsorship, and research development. And then there's this other bucket of psychosocial support, which also can be connected to things like role modeling, encouragement, affirmation, and things like that that we also know are powerful in the mentoring relationship. I want to highlight three quick takeaways out of the 200+ page report, just for your reference point. And in your handout, you'll see a link to the report where you can get slides and an interactive website and some of our videos of the different workshops we held. And that's at the bottom of this slide, which is www.nas.edu/mentoring. So the first point out of three that I just want to highlight very briefly from our NASM report is that mentorship happens in an ecosystem. So even though we're talking about, and most of my examples will be related to dyadic relationships, that is one mentee and one mentor, we know that the individual who's being mentored and the one who's doing the mentoring are in this series of concentric circles from the kind of an ecological perspective, where we're looking at proximal relationships, like things that happen in a department or in a training program, all the way to what's happening at the societal or federal level that can affect how trainees' development happens and the effectiveness of mentorship. So I do want to acknowledge that we're describing the complex system in which mentorship happens, but for the sake of today, I'm going to focus on that kind of most inner green circle, looking at the individual and then their relationships to their mentor. The second point I want to highlight from the NASM report is that we found evidence that mentorship is a learned skill. What we found from a survey of UCLA that was conducted at UCLA for undergraduate mentors of undergraduates is only about 7% in the mid 2010s, this is about 2015, had received mentorship education, which means that most of us were doing mentorship based on the job training. For like it or lump it, better or worse, we mentored the way we were mentored, or we mentored many of us may have had bad models or less than desirable mentors. My colleague Stephen Thomas calls it a tormentor. That was the anti-model, like the opposite of what they did is how we mentor. But we actually in a wonderful scenario now with the development of the Center for the Improvement of Mentored Experiences and Research, which is the image you have in front of you, SIMMER, where we have validated mentor and mentee educational curricula that have been developed and tested and randomized control designs. I've done several of those studies. They're published in high impact peer-reviewed journals, so we know what the competencies are. There are core 8 competencies in mentorship education for mentors, things like aligning expectations, assessing for understanding, promoting effective communication, fostering independence. And not only have we standardized these competencies, but we have validated measures to assess how well the mentoring relationship is promoting those competencies, both from the mentor and the mentee perspective. And as I said earlier, these curricula, though they were originally developed for those in the basic and the biomedical sciences, they've been adapted across many disciplines, from astronomy to history. One of our recent collaborators from Harvard University is the history department that's taken these curricula for their graduate training. So again, this is useful for all of us as we think about elevating and expanding what it looks like to be effective as a mentor. We don't have to guess anymore. And we have mentorship curricula that are available for those who are mentoring across different career stages, mentoring undergraduates, graduates and postdocs, and even early career faculty. The third point I want to raise is from the NASM report is that we did find evidence that responding to and recognizing the lived experiences of the people we're mentoring contributes to mentoring effectiveness. Specifically, mentors who show interest in, and value mentees' lived experiences and their personal backgrounds. That kind of interest is positively correlated with the things we care about, like science identity, being satisfied with the mentoring relationship, even being committed to a research career. That's with the undergraduate sample. Another study found that this culturally responsive mentorship interest is positively associated with graduate students continuing their graduate education and even entering into a research career. And a paper that myself and Dr. Christine Fund, one of my great colleagues who I get to collaborate with a lot, and the director of CIMR, the Center for the Improvement of Mentored Experiences and Research. She and I collaborated with UC San Diego Health Sciences, and they created a faculty mentoring program for early career faculty. We published that paper with Joanne Trejo in 2021 that showed evidence that positive, effective mentoring relationships was positively correlated with faculty who were being mentored, their morale as an employee, and their perceived support from their institution. That was the biggest benefit, was for those people who were from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups and people identified as LGBT. So we see that there's more than just having people who are satisfied with their mentoring relationships, but when we do mentoring that is based on competencies, it has a focus on evidence-based constructs, we can actually move the needle on the things we care about. So just to summarize this, the reason that we focused on mentorship in this National Academies report is that mentorship is an important part of graduate education. It's not the only thing that predicts student success, but it is a large part of that success factor. There's evidence that the higher the quality of mentoring, the shorter time to doctoral degree. That's based on a longitudinal study at Vanderbilt. We thought that was pretty convincing. So if you do mentoring well, your students get out. They're not hanging around for 7 to 9 years. There's more space for students to come in who are newer to graduate education. We also found evidence that students who experience mentorship that's responsive to their lived backgrounds, in addition to those other factors I described before, have more engagement in their mentoring relationship. That is, they're more empowered to activate it. Their self-efficacy for research is stronger. They have positive perceptions of the lab climate, and they're more motivated to pursue their career. And this is what deans and chairs like to hear that I work with, is like, we know that happy students are happy alumni. They're going to get involved. They'll pick up the phone and when you call and ask them to support and give back, not just to advocate for your department and their alma mater, but also to donate. So now that I've made the case about the importance of mentorship education and the fact that we have templates now and curricula that help us do it better so we don't have to guess and just kind of figure it out as we go, I want to acknowledge that there are many things that are facing our trainees, dare I say higher education. Some of you on the call might be department chairs dealing with a lot of challenges of how we activate our graduate education and successful students in the middle of a lot of changing environments. In the title of my talk, I referenced that phrase, mentoring in the current moment, because we're living in what economic scientists call a super cycle of transformation. This is from the economics work. Super cycle of transformation is defined by political and social contracts that are changing on a very frequent basis, the changing nature of work, how we do it, where we do it, when we do it, economic and legal rules that are being rewritten. It seems like, I know we have a dean on the call, it seems like monthly, that institutions are responding to, and even just at climatological level, climate patterns are shifting. You all just dug out in the state of New York from an incredible blizzard. I don't know what it looked like upstate, but certainly downstate, it was pretty terrifying. And so when you think about all these things swirling, there are many things that our students and mentees might be challenged with as they think about, why am I in graduate education at this moment? If we, given the changing nature of the world, I was working with the Howard Hughes Medical Institute program on the Gilliam program, which is a predoctoral training program for students around the country in the biomedical sciences. And we were doing some work with them in 2016. This is right after the murder of Michael Brown in St. Louis, an unarmed Black teenager. And many of the students in the program were people of color themselves, and they could not reconcile in their brain the opportunity they had to go to graduate school, many elite universities, while people who look like them are literally dying in the street. And you think about the number of things we're dealing with just in the last 2 months of political violence and national protests and things like that. So I want to stop for a second and just ask you, because I think there's some things in the chat, but I can't see. Now I can. One of the things I just want to prompt you with is, what do you think, and I do want you to put this in the chat, what do you think that are some of the issues or top of the mind concerns that your students are experiencing right now? Just go ahead and put it in the chat. Just take a peek. What are some of the things that are top of mind that your graduate students, your trainees are wrestling with at this current moment? And maybe just 2 or 3 people at least who just throw something to chat. Thank you so much. Job prospect, their future job security funding, which is a huge issue. Some people are in philosophy, so they're worried about the dearth of jobs in the humanities. Strong distress, especially for international students who can't travel home, can't see families, or got out of the country and may not be able to come back. Geopolitics. Thank you so much. And so when we start to think about this context, mentorship is not a panacea. It is not going to fix everything. The question is, how can we show up? Thank you so much. Funding for the final year of writing as well, and the changing role, social role of higher education. So as we think about how we show up in mentorship in this moment, I want to center my remarks back to 2 different comments, 2 different things that we might be able to do in this moment. I'm going to pass by this because I like a good movie and I think about the hero's journey. I'm just a big Disney fan. And I'm going to say very quickly, when I was completing my graduate education almost 30 years ago, I graduated in 1997 with my doctorate. I could say that sometimes it felt like I was on an epic quest, the kind that's in the main character, that the main character goes through in movies like, Star Wars or The Hunger Games or Wonder Woman or Mulan or Black Panther. Harry Potter, and Joseph Campbell. For those who are humanities or behavioral science on the call, you'll probably recognize that name. He wrote a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces and really defined the characteristics of the hero's journey, where someone is kind of going along with the status quo, pursuing their life's mission, goals, in this case, graduate education, and then disruption happens, right? That upsets the the known and moves that person into the unknown. If you're the movie Frozen fan like me, into the unknown is what's happening, right? So now I'm trying to figure out all the things that I thought I was going to do, how I was going to do it, why I was coming to graduate education, and now it seems like it's upside down. And during that hero's quest, Joseph Campbell reminds us that that's when the hero faces a number of trials. It doesn't just prompt them to look deeply in terms of their environment to navigate the unknown, but also to look inward to navigate the internal unknown. They face a crisis, they face the pit, and then they finally come out triumphant on the other side. Sounds good, sounds easy, makes it for a great job, great movie, but really hard to navigate as a mentor, supporting someone through that process. So I want to suggest that there are 2 things that we, as mentors, might lean into in this current moment. This is the practical part of my presentation. As we think about foundational mentorship skills that I hopefully made a case for in the first 10 minutes of why we need to get mentorship education, just so we have a framework of how even to support our trainees. Now, on top of that, I want to lay these 2 factors that might be useful for our consideration as we support our trainees in this current moment of the super cycle of transformation that I just described a few minutes ago. First is empathic listening, and the second one is a focus on flourishing, and I'll describe both of those in detail. With empathic listening, I think what's challenging for us is that many of us in higher education, if you're like me, have been a faculty member for 29 years. I got into higher education and became a professor because I'm driven to solve problems in my particular field. And simply put, I would argue that's the case for most of us on this call. We are doers, we are fixers, see a problem, fix a problem. And so the challenge in this current moment is for us to not think about how we are going to fix things for our trainees. We can't change all of the challenges that were just listed in the chat, like job prospects, uncertain funding, things to that nature, international issues. But what we can do is listen, but not just listen with our ears. We want to listen deeply from an empathic perspective. So Ruth Gotian wrote an article in Nature in their career column a few years ago during COVID, and suddenly this feels strangely relevant again to where we were 6 years ago with the uncertainty of the world during COVID-19, the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. And she really emphasized the importance of mentors listening and not trying to fix. And she says, as in all mentoring relationships, and especially during times of heightened stress, it is not your role as a mentor to fix a mentee's problems. Instead, acknowledge the full range of their emotions and let them know that what they are feeling is natural and acceptable. And so before defining and illustrating the role of empathic relationships, I just want to highlight what it is and what it is not. It's not problem solving. If we start at the top of these concentric circles and then go clockwise around these bubbles, she emphasizes the importance of first being able to recognize emotions, stay out of judgment. So recognizing emotions, especially for me working mainly with basic sciences and biomedical science people, many of the colleagues I work with in those fields are not necessarily tuned in a lab environment that could be quite hierarchical, lots of relationships, a staff manager, a lab manager, a postdoc, graduate students, undergraduates. There are a lot of moving parts, and the focus so much on doing sometimes makes it hard to slow down and recognize emotions. But that's the beginning of it. And that requires us to be able to have an internal, intentional connection with our own emotions, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Secondly, is staying out of judgment, having no evaluation, good or bad, or the other way about a person, in this case, a trainee, expressing what they feel, communicating back that emotion, and then taking their perspective. And so Brene Brown says that empathic listening is about connection and trust. So I'm going to play a video, and I did a little test run with Molly. Let's see if it works. And this will be about 2.5 minutes. And this is a clip of Brene Brown, who's a professor of social work. Many of you might know her work. She's an author who's kind of well known for her work on vulnerability. And she gave a podcast that's on a YouTube video 2 years ago on the difference between empathy versus sympathy. And I'd like for you to listen to that as we consider how to apply empathy with listening.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So I wanted to stop and share that and reemphasize her last point, which is the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection. And the importance of one of her other key takeaways, she said in kind of a dramatic way, but not having our responses start with at least. And when you think about the things that you put in the chat about what our students are facing, which are quite challenging, the empathic response says, I feel that with you. May not understand, may not be able to fix it, but in that animated cartoon, there's a presence. I will be here with you. We'll figure it out. You're not alone. And so when we think about empathic listening, it's about relationship. So that's the first thing I want to invite us to do in this historical moment where there are many things swirling for both ourselves and for our trainees, that we take the time to think about how can we show up in empathic ways. And let me also acknowledge that many of the things that are in the chat are things that we as people who already have our terminal degrees and already employed are also facing too. And so there is this duality that I don't want to lose in this conversation of many of the things that our trainees are facing that are affecting them about the unknown and their hero's journey or heroine's journey is the same thing that many of us are feeling as well. Loss of funding, right? The grants that I had for 15 years, which was a blessing, I'm not complaining, the RFAs were completely wiped out at NIH. There's nothing left for me to apply for. Been knocking on the doors at Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and Spencer Foundation and Doris Duke Foundation, so many places to try and get money, but guess what? So are all of us. And they're not handing out those grants at the same level. The NIH reimagining what overhead looks like to universities. And so the trickle-down effect is on faculty to think about how we're going to fund our work. So I just want to be gracious to ourselves that the empathy that we're giving, I hope that we also get to receive. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I want to highlight and mention of what we might be able to do in this historical moment is to focus on flourishing and helping our mentees to navigate life transitions that could range from the typical uncertainty everyone faces in early career development to what I described earlier as that super cycle of transformation. We can lean into the psychosocial functioning of mentorship to support their flourishing. So remember, I highlighted using Kathy Cram's work in the National Academy's definition that there are two main functions that we use to be effective in our mentorship: career functions and psychosocial functioning. And I want to support us as mentors leaning more into this flourishing component, which would crosswalk onto the psychosocial function of mentorship. So when you think of flourishing, I'm not sure what comes to mind for you. For me, it's usually something green and something that looks like an item, or not an item, but something living in nature. A plant that is blooming and healthy often comes to mind. And this work on flourishing was really popularized, although I want to acknowledge that First Nations people, Native American folk, and people of African descent and Asian, like many folk have been talking about what it means to live the good life for a long time. I'm going to use the definition and framework from Western psychology by Martin Seligman, who's a psychologist, who said, who really popularized the notion of flourishing. And he said, to flourish is to find fulfillment in our lives. It means accomplishing meaningful and worthwhile tasks and connecting with each other at a deeper level. It is the quote unquote good life. So I want to highlight a way that flourishing has been articulated is in a multidimensional way that's made up of several parts. Most popularized are these 6 factors starting at the top of this image, going clockwise. Each one of these letters, the first letter of each word can create an acrostic. The positivity, engagement, relationships, meaning, achievement, and vitality or health. And if you put the first letters of each one of these 6 words together and swap out vitality for health, the letter H is called the PERMA model, PERMAH. And I want to highlight how these 6 dimensions of flourishing can be useful to us in thinking about supporting our trainees in this current moment with some practical takeaways for us. I do want to emphasize that psychological science tells us that flourishing is not an achieved end. It is something that is constantly unfolding and has to be deliberately attended to. So that's why the concept of flourishing has an ing suffix, because it is not a state, it's a process. It's not an individual characteristic or trait, it is a way of being. So I suggest that a focus on flourishing in our mentorship can be another way to support our trainees in this current moment. So I'm going to take the last 10, 15 minutes now, and then we'll go into Q&A to highlight how each one of these letters or each one of these factors in this 6-factor model flourishing might be useful for our trainees. The first one, P, and we're going to go clockwise in these 6 factors, is positivity. And this is really about minding our mindset. Again, all the things that were in the chat are quite overwhelming. Not being able to see your family for a year or 2 because it's not safe to leave the country if you're an international student and not sure you can get back in, given the changing visa policies. So as you think about supporting your trainees, we have to encourage our mentors to share what's working well and to do what I call decoding their stress responses. What's working well and decoding their stress responses. So you might ask mentees, for example, what happens when they encounter challenges? When they've had a challenge in the past, nobody is challenge free. Maybe invite them to tell you a story of how they've managed a challenge in the past, being more explicit about the implicit, unspoken concerns can help us find out for the trainee what has worked for them in the past. What type of support might be useful to them in their current moment? What do they typically do when they are faced with a challenge? It also helps us to think about for ourselves, but also our trainees, is how can we practice positive self-talk? So with that in mind, I love this image I came across this a couple of years ago. And the sign up says this escalator is temporarily out of service. And then someone wrote a line through the words out of service and just put the word stairs. This is a great example to me of positivity. Then what we call rational optimism, which I'll describe in a minute. When an escalator is out of service, some might see a problem, others might see a stairs. That's a mindset, right? Like, how can we focus on the good things, not ignoring that there are really real challenges happening? That's rational optimism. It doesn't say there's pie in the sky, everything's going to be right. But there are some things that are working well. I'm still here. That's my reference point with a lot of things. Like, somehow the year 2026 has already felt very long. And it's only been 8 weeks, but it's been a long year already. But there are some good things that are still happening. And one of them is that I'm still here today with you, March 2nd, 2026. I'm still alive. And so we can start to help our trainees to tap into ways that they can manage their self-talk and promote more rational optimism. And I'll give you a whole strategy for how to do this, but I just want to go through all 6 factors. The second one is engagement. And again, we're going clockwise on this wheel. And engagement refers to energizing experiences. If you have ever felt completely absorbed in anything where you lose track of time, you maybe forget to eat or use the restroom, you might be experiencing a state of what psychologists call flow. That's what engagement is like. And we know that when you achieve these states of flow and engagement, it can actually help create more enjoyment, more energy, and more involvement. Flow is a state of mind in which a person becomes fully immersed in an activity in what Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who's a positive psychologist, describes when the ego falls away, time flies, and every action, moment, and thought follows inevitably from the previous one. Just like playing jazz, your whole being is involved. Now, here's what's interesting is that when we have these flow experiences, it actually releases those good neurotransmitters in the brain, those good chemicals in the brain called endorphins. So it can actually help to boost mood. And so we want to encourage our mentees to do things that they're good at, because most of our degrees are going to take, most of our terminal degrees that we are training our students in are going to take anywhere from 4 to 7, maybe even 8 years to achieve. So when you have these long-term goals, it's important to think about how can we encourage our mentees to do things that they're good at for in the moment, and have more of these joy experiences so that they're energized. So for me, my experience was with engagement as a graduate student is that as a counseling psych student, it takes about 5 years to complete the degree. And at the end of year 2, I was really, really burned out. I was just like hitting the ground too hard, trying to do everything, trying to be the most successful student, the one who publishes the most, first. I started a student organization, blah, blah, blah. I was really getting tapped out, and I told my advisor that I wanted to take a semester off. And she said, instead of taking a semester off, since you finished most of your coursework, why don't you just go take another class on campus just for fun? Because we still had to do clinical work like seeing patients and things like that. And so I had enough credits that I could still be full-time and take something else. And I just switched up and I went and took Italian for a year. And it didn't help that the professor was very easy on the eyes. I wrote the textbook that we used, but just tried something different that gave me a sense of joy and flow without the need for performance or evaluation. And so this is connected to another way to think about engagement, and that is that we do more play and encourage more moments of joy for our students. For me, it's salsa dancing. I joined about 3 years ago after the end of the initial acute phase of COVID-19. I joined a 40 and over women's double Dutch club, just with a jumping rope with 2 ropes. I started committing to salsa dancing again and just took a couple of free classes in the community, things that just allow me to be in the moment. There's a great amount of research on the benefits of adulting, which is a term that was popularized during COVID, where adults get back to play, things that allow them to just have joy. And there's so much research about the benefits of adulting, this kind of play or engagement experience. It can help to reduce escape time. How do I want to say this? It can help us escape from stress, boost nostalgia, those kind of flashbacks to just moments when we were unfettered without doctoral degree requirements, and just enjoyed things for the sake of enjoyment with no other end. It's a burnout barrier. Mindfulness moments can be increased. It's a break from the routine and it can fuel creativity. The third factor is relationships, which will make a lot of sense to us, especially as we get more digitized in this community, even or in this current moment where we're more digitally connected, but according to the Surgeon General in 2024, socially isolated. So as humans, we are literally designed for connection. You can see it if you've ever been around an infant. We are designed to be in community, to be in relationship. We all need authentic, meaningful lives and life-enhancing connections. So being more connected to friends and to family and partners and others can clear our head and boost our mood. Research shows that good relationships help people live longer, deal with stress better, have healthier habits, and have stronger resistance even to colds, the common cold. And so we have to think about ways to make time and support our trainees to make time to connect with others that would be helpful in terms of their mental health. There's some interesting research also about out of social psychology that really emphasize that there are two key powerful needs that drive all human behaviors and beliefs. They're not the only one, but they're key. And that is that we all need to be authentic. That is, we need to have ways to be our transparent self, our true self with others. And we need relationship attachment, authenticity and attachment. And some of the work by psychologist Dr. Gabor Mate said that when authenticity threatens attachment, attachment always trumps authenticity. What does that mean? When being my true authentic self will threaten if people like me or not, if I'm connected, if I'm in relationship, I'm more likely to downplay, dismiss, cloak, hide, shapeshift to fit in so that I can be in a group. Attachment will always trump authenticity, which is why we spend a lot of time talking about belonging research and social connections. I think those are kind of the popular names that diversity, equity, inclusion offices have now been renamed to those terms. But the research behind those terms, belonging, social inclusion, are quite powerful. Some of the work by Patricia Hewlin, who's a professor at University of Michigan, said that based on her research, about 30% of people in any organization feel pressure to suppress their personal values and identity. That is to hold back, to cloak, to hide their true selves. And when we create these facades of conformity due to psychological safety, again, things that would threaten my connections, it could lead to a lot of things that are not helpful to graduate success or to all of us in general. Dissonance, emotional exhaustion, higher depressive symptoms, reduced engagement at work, lower organizational commitment, and increased intentions to leave. So when we think about the importance of relationships, there are things we can do to help our trainees think about connecting more authentically. It might be in small ways with a few people, especially for those who are international students away from their families of origin, to think about ways they could have these authentic connections where they don't feel the pressure to hide, to downplay, to cloak who they really are. The fourth bucket is meaning, and that is the importance about staying clear on your why. Research is very clear that fulfillment comes from following our purpose and our passion. I'll call this the power of purpose part of this factor. Meaning gives us a framework or a narrative to place ourselves in a larger story that our existence matters. Meaning comes from having a clear sense of what my long-term goals are and my guiding values. So again, meaning is not just a sense of my purpose, but it's also connected to having long-term goals, my why. Why am I here? What are my talents? What are my gifts? And how do I want to use them in service to a larger purpose bigger than myself? It can also come from feeling accountable to a higher power, for example, but it's literally about my why and a sense of goals. There's some very fascinating research. It's a little complicated to explain, so I'm really going to simplify it, but there's the actual article title here for you if you want the larger study. It was published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology in 2022 by McGregor and his colleagues that is titled, has a very long subtitle, so I just put the first title there, the first part of the title, Higher Power Dynamics. And in this study, they did a series of experiments with undergraduate students where they had the participants describe a very stressful situation and what it made them feel like. And then they had the students hooked up to an EEG to look at their brain activity while they recalled that stressful situation and then described how their life goals reflected their highest values. So they reactivated the stressful situation that the student had described, and then they had the person write down how my life goals, my why, fit or reflect my highest values. And what they found is on this EEG that looks at electrical brain activity, it activated basic dopaminergic motivational systems in the brain that actually reduced and muted anxiety. So what does that mean? That means that when we are connected to our why, even when life is falling apart, even when things are stressful, and out of our control to some degree. Remembering our meaning, remembering our why, our larger purpose, and the goals for why I'm here at Stony Brook to get this degree can help mute and well, I wouldn't say silence, but kind of help curb some of the anxiety about the things I can't control. The fifth bucket is relating to achievement, which has to do with cultivating, accomplishing minor milestones. So building on that last bucket of meaning, when I'm clear on my why, then my greatest purpose, then I can set goals to express those values. And accomplishing a goal necessitates perseverance and having passion to stick to it and see it through. So achievement is the realization of one's potential, feeling that I can do it. So how do we get there? We know that research is very clear for undergraduate and graduate students. When they have a sense of achievement and minor successes, just small wins, which we'll talk about in a second, they are less likely to procrastinate. That research is extremely compelling. And I have a high school daughter and a college daughter, and I'm very excited about this research. I've shared this with them. I'm not sure they're listening yet, but I'm like, if you could just finish that Spanish exam, just turn in that one essay on my college daughter's an environmental science major, just finish that one assignment on ecology, just small successes beget future successes. This is kind of the Albert Bandura self-efficacy research model, which is my passion. So small wins beget future wins. So one success can lead to another success. And so this is really nicely captured in some research that many of you might be familiar with in the book that was published in 2021 called The Progress Principle, about the power of progress, the power of small wins. I just talked in the previous two factors of the model, relationships and meaning, about the power of purpose. Now we're talking about the power of progress. And this work by two colleagues at Harvard University, Amabile and Kramer, reminded us from amazing research they did that achieving minor milestones is a sustaining force that can help us build the stamina needed to persist to achieve our long-term goals. I'll say that again. Achieving minor milestones is a sustaining force that can help us build the stamina needed to persist and achieve our long-term goals. And so they argue in their book that the number one factor that can enhance motivation, emotions, and even productivity is making progress on meaningful work. Maybe you don't get the whole abstract written for the basic scientists I work with, needed for a paper, but maybe you write the first 2 lines. Maybe in my field of counseling psychology, where we write 8,000 word papers for publication, maybe you don't do all of the introduction, but you just get the opening sentence, thinking about these small wins. Okay. And then finally, this last bucket is on vitality. And that has to do with this final dimension of flourishing encourages us as mentors to really support mentees in nurturing their wellness and their health. That includes things like eating well, moving regularly, sleeping deeply daily, and taking time to recover. And I want to just highlight a few pieces about the recovery component specifically, because it's been connected to burnout, and I'll tell you how. One of my colleagues here at the School of Business at UW-Madison published an article with his colleagues in Harvard Business Review 2.5 years ago, and the title of this article is "Don't Let Passion Lead to Burnout on Your Team." But what their research showed is that they had employees across the country, across different fields, document daily how passionate and burned out they felt at the beginning and end of every day. And what they found is that employees reported feeling less burned out on the days when they felt more passionate about their work. Makes sense. I'm excited. I was in flow. I got a lot done, really energized. But what they found that was very interesting is on the day following a very passionate day, employees actually felt more burned out than usual. What does that mean? They found out that high-performing individuals who are passionate about their work are the ones most vulnerable to burnout. Why? Because they did not build in recovery. And I've had that experience on a regular basis. You knocked the presentation out of the park, you got that grant submitted, and then you just went on to the next thing. Didn't build time to recover and rest. And this was a slide or a post that came up on Twitter during COVID. And this person said that burnout exists because we've made rest a reward rather than a right. Oh, I'll rest later when when I finish this big grant or when I finish this article, or even the most morbid statement that used to be popular in the 80s, I'll rest when I'm dead. How morbid is that? It's like, no, that is your birthright, to be in rest. And so one of the things that I work with many graduate students on is a nap ministry deck of cards. I actually have it myself. It may not come up because I have the background on. But it's a box of about 50 cards that I give students that's based on Tricia Hershey's work on Rest as Resistance. That's her book. And in this deck, it gives you different cards with a statement on it and then things you could do to rest on the back. So one of the cards I'm looking at in my hand, it says, I will unravel from urgency. And on the back, it gives instructions for finding a comfortable place to relax for just a few minutes and say things like, I deserve patience, grace, and mercy, and how I will rest. There's another card I have in my hand, I am not lazy. And it says, find a quiet place again to speak out loud. I will give myself rest from the systems that taught me that my performance is my worth. So there are things that I think are important to build into our mentoring relationships. In this case, with vitality or health and our well-being, it's connected to something that Shakespeare said, which I thought was pretty powerful, that a good night's rest is the balm of hurt minds. So I often ask the graduate students I work with is, what self-care practices that you have in the past that you stepped away from in graduate school? What are some that you might reclaim? So I hope I've convinced you now that if you think about empathic listening and you think about this model of flourishing, which has these 6 letters of positivity, engagement, relationships, meaning, achievement, and vitality or health, I'd like to bring it all together. I just gave you the little cue. On your handout, you will see a website that, again, out of University of Auckland, Australia, I believe. They have a free survey and a very interactive website that's, again, no fees, but you do have to register, that you could take assessments on the PERMA model. Again, each one of those letters are the ones I just went through. The last letter is H, which is health instead of vitality, because the acrostic PERMA would not sound very good. So they put down H for health, but it's the PERMA model on flourishing. It's the University of Melbourne Center for Wellness, excuse me. That's who publishes this. This is in your handout. You can go there. I gave you the instructions of how to find it. Your students can take an assessment. It will give you, after you take your assessment, a color-coded printout of where you fall on the PERMA model compared to different averages around the world of people who've taken it. It will give you ideas and tips for how to support your well-being across those 6 factors. It will give you a nudge toolbox of things you can do in each one. It'll give you a goal setting sheet that has prompts like what I need to do, what I want to do, what I can do. It'll give you some resources about how to thrive at work and some strategies. I also gave you a link to the NIH Office of Intramural Training and Education. Again, you'll see my style is no good idea should be used once. So let's use what people have already studied and put out there. So the OITE has a series of resources that are virtual, and some are in person. It is for the intramural training workforce of graduate students and postdocs who are there. But for the virtual ones, it's available, as far as I understand, to other people. They have a well-being tab on that website. And every single Thursday of the month, they have what's called Thriving Thursdays. These are drop-in groups for 30 to 45 minutes, virtual, that'll help the trainees think about ways they can thrive. They have a live online open forum every Friday called Fridays with Phil, who's one of the staff there there who lead conversations for graduate students and postdocs on how they can thrive. They have mindfulness virtual sessions I think it's every Tuesday and Thursday for 30 minutes, 12 to 12:30. It's virtual, it's online. They have a whole series, 5 of them on becoming a resilient scientist training. And here's the thing, it's on their YouTube channel. I put that in your handout. You don't even have to wait. Some of the faculty that I work with and their mentoring are using these training series through the Becoming a Resilient Scientist to use in real time as a group discussion with their trainees. They go through it together. So in closing, I want to highlight something that my colleague, Beronda Montgomery, who used to be the Dean of Students at Grinnell College, wrote a book called Lessons from Plants. She's a plant biologist. And she said, we need to make a strategic plan for how much energy to allocate into which activity and determine where within our community to search for greater resources, depending on our current conditions. Sunlight and nutrients are not static, and neither are the circumstances of our lives. When a situation changes, it's important to become aware and to respond accordingly. Thank you. I'm going to formally end my comments now and stop sharing my screen so that we can have a discussion because I can't see anything. Hi, friends. Now I can see you all. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So now is the time for us to open up for discussion, responses. Thank you for the hands. I appreciate all of that. Thank you all for staying. I realize that folk have different commitments, so continue to stay as long as your schedule allows. But we have 15, 20 minutes or so, and I'll look to you, Molly, maybe to help field any questions, but you're welcome to come off of mute. We could just keep this old school. If many people respond at the same time, just use a raise hand feature so that I'll have a sense of who wants to offer something into the space.
Absolutely, and I will also monitor the chat. So if you want to contribute your question in the chat, I can read it out.
Yeah, we have another Beronda Montgomery fan, my Lisa, the chat. Thank you. I'll lean on you, Molly, to take in the questions.
Sure. Carol, I see your hand up.
Hi, yes. So, Angela, I enjoyed very much your presentation and made lots of notes about, strategies that could be helpful, as you say, across the board, depending on whether we're looking at a junior faculty member or whether we're talking to a student. I wanted to ask you a question. So, you said that you were going to focus your comments on the sort of two-person relationship, mentee-mentor. Often in my experience, the mentor is the source of the stress, whether that is intentional or not. And so I'm just wondering what guidance you'd give because we all have had experiences of being third party involvers. But if
Yes.
but if you want to, make that two party more effective, what advice do you give?
Oh, that's one. Thank you, Karen. Yes, there's always that sticky wicket that sometimes mentoring relationships don't go right. And so, if I hear you're asking correctly, is how can we support mentees when they have bad relationships with other mentors? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, often the case of the mentor does not necessarily mean to be the person imposing
Yes.
the stress, but they are.
Yes. Two things I'll highlight. One is that we do have, when I say we, the Center for the Improvement of Mentored Experiences in Research, CIMR, which is also in your handout. We have a number of resources available for the trainees, specifically to empower them in a more agentic way to get what they need out of those mentoring relationships, including handling negative mentoring relationships. So I want to lift up the possibility of having our trainees use the Mentoring Up curriculum. Some of you might be familiar with it. It's taken from the business world of managing up, where entry-level folk might be navigating bad or less than desirable management relationships. So that's one thing because it gives specific strategies on problem solving, troubleshooting bad relationships. The other thing is working with our training directors and our department chairs and even sometimes our deans to think about ways to build and raise the bar of expectation for all faculty in that particular program or training department. I'll give you an example. One of our clients at Vanderbilt University Basic Sciences had the scenario you were describing with one particular faculty in particular who was quite challenging. All the students knew it, but also quite powerful, popular, and had a lot of resources, so had many trainees. Their focus was not to go after just the one mentor, but to build a mentoring culture in the ecosystem that said this is the expectation for what we're looking for all of our mentors. So also thinking about the systems level, but I would start with the mentoring up curriculum. And then if you're really interested on specific things, Erin Dolan, Dolan, and University of Georgia, that's her specialty. She's published a lot of articles on how to handle and even measure negative mentoring relationships.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
That was a great question. Katie, I see your hand up as well.
Hi, Angela. Thank you so much for that amazing talk. I found what you said about empathy and the difference between empathy and sympathy really fascinating and something that I've empirically run into quite a lot with students and something, and I guess in some ways it is something that I struggle with, to your point about how we all want to try to solve their problems for them. And then, so I had an experience recently where I was on a panel at a conference. So it wasn't a one-on-one mentoring relationship, admittedly, but in trying to figure out the things to talk about, I found that, it was being organized by a postdoc, and her approach to it was sort of the focus on the problem side of it. They wanted, I think, in some ways to sort of have the the anxiety of the moment acknowledged, and yet I sort of felt like our goal, our imperative was to try to move them to solutions because there are things we can do in this moment, sort of in this moment. So to that point about sort of making progress forward. And yet I feel like a lot of the conversations we were having sort of mirrors what you mentioned about this notion of empathizing with where they are, instead of sympathy and sort of handing them tools. Admittedly, it wasn't a mentoring situation, but I guess I'm trying to, do you have any comment on how this idea of empathic listening, how could I have done a better job basically having that conversation? Or is it just apples and oranges when we're talking about sort of giving a talk to an audience about solutions versus trying to individually support someone? Does that question make sense?
Let's muddle through it together. I think what I hear you saying, so I was at again, the dyadic level between the mentor and mentee
Right.
is, there's only there's an important navigation and negotiation, I should say, between the mentor and the mentee about how how much and what that affirmation and empathic presence looks like. And I'll give you an example. So the difference for me between a lot of the coaching I do and therapy that I'm trained to do is with coaching, at a certain point, I'm moving to action, right? I could still be affirming and present. As a therapist, I'm going to go to root cause and do a lot more kind of digging at the intrapsychic level, like what are the root causes of where you are. With coaching, I need to get to identify the issue and let's get to a solution. The sweet spot in there about how much I stay empathic in acknowledging this is difficult, this is hard to change, is part of the conversation for the mentee. And I'm thinking about a colleague I'm navigating right now. I have a postdoc, and again, money is dried up. I was hoping I could keep her beyond June 30th, but I can't. Money ends then, and so we're having some conversations about here's a PhD. She's been out for 3 years. She's in social psych. Doesn't want to be a professor. Did a few job talks for a teaching ed position, but like many of the things in the chat, she's just not getting any hooks. She's not getting any bites. And so I can be empathic and stay right here with her of where she is in the unknown, the uncertainty of future challenges and career opportunities. And we need some strategies as well, right? But not moving beyond the fact that this is really hard. So I have created, as of 3 weeks ago, the top of February, at the beginning of every one of our weekly meetings, I just give her 5 minutes, however and whatever she wants to say about how she's feeling so that there is a container and acknowledgement as we're still moving forward in tasks and goals and planning. But I give that as kind of a very raw example off the top of my dome about it's a navigation, it's a negotiation, because I ask, how can I support you since I don't have more employment for you? I'm doing, and you're contractually obligated to still do work with me, but it stinks. And I'll give you an example. I was not approved for tenure the first time in my former department. And my tenure case was turned down in February, and I was obligated to still teach all my classes, go to all faculty meetings until June that year. I still had a year left on my clock, but at least till June. It was like the most demoralizing thing. How do you want me to focus and publish and stand in front of students that I'm not going to be here for much longer? And so I hold on to it. I use that example. It's kind of raw, and I'm sorry that was kind of a heavy example. It's true. It is ripped from the pages of my life. And life continued to happen. I still had obligations. Why did I share that, Katie? Because I had to pull from my experience and use that as an empathic response to. I don't know what your experience is like. I know what it's like to feel like things aren't working out and I still got to show up and use that as feelings are direct lines of learning of how I can then be in space with you. So that may not have answered everything. I think I'm trying to give you an example of part of empathic listening, as I mentioned before in Brene Brown, is I have to be relatively willing to be conscious myself. I may not share that example with my trainee, but conscious of what it feels like to be stuck. What would it feel like to be out of control? Like I can't get home to see my family for a year, like, and sitting with that. It was very raw and off the dome on that one, Katie. But I'd be curious if
No,
other
thank
people
you,
have
Angela.
thoughts.
That was perfect because I think we all struggle with that of like we do want to help, but yeah, we also want to be able to acknowledge them. So thank you for that.
If there's anything in the chat, more things. Okay.
I actually had a quick question, and thank you. That was just terrific, Angela. Really, really good. As I was watching or listening to you talk about flourishing, it occurred to me that I think all of academia needs those talking points because I think, how many junior colleagues do I know who are flourishing? How many associate professors are flourishing? How many full professors are flourishing? And, it made me think academia has not historically been a place for flourishing. So I think part of it is fighting back. I'm just wondering if you could, help us think a little bit more about, for those of us who are in the mentor training space, how do we support junior faculty who are, if our grad students and postdocs are stressed out, our junior faculty are incredibly stressed out. How do we support them, other than giving them the wonderful SIMMER curriculum, which we do, what are some of the ways that academia writ large can help support our faculty to be better mentors?
Help support our junior faculty to be better mentors.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I was just thinking of
Okay.
faculty generally, but I think junior faculty right now are really struggling with that uncertainty, perhaps more than those with tenure.
Yes, you hit on the work of Linda Pololi, Polloli. She's been doing a lot of work on faculty vitality, taking the notion of flourishing. She has measures and interventions. We were both funded through the NIH on R01s to study this. Linda Pololi, Polloli. And in one of her articles on faculty vitality, she identified 4 vulnerability factors for faculty. She's basically looking at academic medicine. If you're under 40, more than 6 years out of your degree, don't have a mentor, and don't feel institutional support, she has a logistics regression analysis about the higher likelihood you are to leave your institution within a year. So the problem vulnerability factors become your intervention sources. Right? You flip the thing that makes you vulnerable and become a strength. So what she's been finding in some of the in institutions she's working with is building more connection for faculty, and using mentorship as a two-for-one intervention. I'll give you an example from my own experience. We created a mentoring program for underrepresented by race ethnicity medical students who are in their first year of med school at UW because we were going through accreditation in 2017 and our ratings for student satisfaction by race ethnicity for underrepresented groups were in the bottom quartile in the country of all medical students. So the dean said, fix it. And we're like, okay, how do you fix it? One of the things the student said is we don't see enough people who look like us who are also physicians or the educators or the preceptors or blah, 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 all the things that go with medical school. So I happened to be on this call. I said, well, mentorship again is not a panacea. But the students said they want more connection. Maybe what we do is build a mentoring program. So two things happened. Actually, this paper is in revision right now at Academic Medicine for publication. But the two things happened. We're 6 years into the program. We doubled by absolute numbers the racial ethnic minority students who enrolled in medical school. So the dean was happy. And number two, we trained mentors who are from underrepresented racial ethnic groups in medicine to be their mentors. And the added value we got is that the faculty felt more connected with each other because they built their own community through our mentor training, and they felt like they had purpose, going back to meaning and faculty vitality, because they were touching directly the next generation of medical students. So we actually retained more faculty who not only felt connected with each other, better connected to their organization, according to Linda Pololi, big factor for retaining you. They felt like the organization was committed to them because we worked with a wonderful dean like you, Dean Marshak, to say we need letters of support from the chair so we don't do more underrepresented faculty community service that doesn't get counted for anything. Nope, you got a letter of support from the chair. They got funding to support their professional development recognized by the dean. Like we built all the things and lo and behold, it worked. Not the fix, a perfect fix, but to answer your question, we use mentoring as the vehicle to help those being mentored, but also those doing the mentoring. And Linda Pololi's work might be useful to you.
I think we might have time for one more question if someone is holding back on one and would like to come off mute.
Oh, look at all the wonderful colleagues who persisted to the end. Thank you all so much. I
Yeah.
know that you have many things on your time. Thank you for staying.
Oh, Katie, go ahead.
Sorry, I always have questions, but if someone else wants to jump in. So Angela, one thing, so you talked initially about sort of the overarching model from CRAM, right, where mentoring needs to have these career focus and this psychosocial focus. And a sort of a foundational challenge that we run into sometimes with research mentor training is that sometimes it's not a given that our faculty mentors think that the psychosocial piece is part of their job. I think sometimes they tend to view themselves a little bit more as sort of line supervisors, and that those other pieces aren't in there. And so, obviously, this is something that we address with the SIMR curriculum when we do research mentor training. But do you have any guidance for us that are trying to create this culture of mentoring and how we can start to shift that for some that haven't experienced that approach to mentoring in the past?
Two responses, Katie. You're hitting the nail on the head. I think many of the colleagues I work with as well, especially in the STEM disciplines of basic life and physical sciences I work with, don't often see the psychosocial part as their purview. Like that's the soft stuff that people like Angela do, right? The behavioral scientists, the psychologists, et cetera. And so two things are happening. One is that we are showing more evidence and publishing that work and getting that to the faculty to show actually attending to these factors will get you this value added in your mentorship effectiveness. So we keep appealing to their desire because most of the faculty I work with want to be successful. They really care about their trainees. They want to be efficient and effective, right? There's that orthogonal relationship. They want to do it well and they want it to have impact. And so we're saying we're showing more evidence, and I think that's something for those doing mentor training is to build in a few articles, just like I, did in my presentation, just a few light touches. Here's the evidence. If you attend to the quality of your relationship, not just the mentoring activities, this is the added value you get for your trainee and the impact. I think the second thing to highlight is the importance of mentoring networks. There are just some faculty, if that's not, we're not asking folk to be therapists. We don't want folk to be outside of their wheelhouse. I have some faculty I've worked with, and they're like, what if I ask a student how they're doing and they actually answer? Then what? I don't have a comeback, right? So like you may need to say that's not my strength. What I can do is I can be the disciplinary mentor, but let's find Sheila, let's find Joe. Joe, and I'd like to mentor you with Joe and let's be a team so we get what you need because they're much better at that. I don't want to shortchange you in that psychosocial support. So Veranda Montgomery has this mentoring what does she call it? A mentoring map. They're called mentoring maps. And some of you all are familiar with that in her work, where you actually have your trainee write out the different needs they have and who's going to fill it. And then tell the other mentors so they all know, oh, wait a minute, somebody's going to do the coaching part, somebody's going to help the career. Great, I don't have to be all things to all. And so the mentoring map helps the student communicate what they need and the mentor, especially their primary mentor, figure out where are you going to get those folk who help you across those various domains. So giving ourselves grace as faculty too. Like there are just some folk I'm like, you may not be the best person for me to tell you about my psychosocial needs. You may not be, and I don't want to mess this up, right? But you're really great at sponsoring me. Let's write an abstract together.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And for those on the call, our graduate students and postdocs who take mentor training with us do that mentor map. So they think about how to build that community of mentors in all of those different domains. Well, Angela, thank you so very, very much. You've given us lots of food for thought and lots of practical strategies that we can carry forward from here. So let's get a round of virtual applause. And
Oh,
thank you
thank you.
all so much for coming. I hope